G'day folks, Dave West from the Boomerang Alliance. We're down at Glades Bay Park continuing our explorations around Sydney Harbour's shoreline to see how much litter there is, and not only how much of it is ending up in the drink, but what actually happens to it once it enters the drink. Let's go and have a look at what we can find. So this is classically along the high tide line, and you can see lots of plastic film stuff. No, you're almost seeing no beverage containers, rigid containers, and the reason for that is that they sink. But what we will find very rapidly in these films is bits of beverage material that doesn't sink. So a straw, a bit of a label straight off, ick, and all of these floating plastics. So these are all lightweight stuff, i.e. they have a specific gravity that is less than water, so they float. If I come down this way further, now no one's tossed this. This is not necessarily intentional litter in this beautiful spot. This is what's coming out of our stormwater drains, flushing into the harbour and washes up along this tidal belt. Now if I take some of this material in the sediment, we're likely to find some microplastic in here. And Andy, can you see that? So there's a little tiny piece of polystyrene logged into the sediment. Whole bunch of synthetic fibre that looks to me like it's fill in maybe a seat or a chair or a mattress. There's a piece of film that's still in the process of breaking down. There's actually a nurdle or plastic resin pellet from a manufacturer, and literally that's a handful. And what have we got there? 7 or 8 pieces plus maybe 5,000 synthetic fibres. This is tidal. There's no indication that people are tossing in here. This is washing up. We're at high tide, so this is almost your king tide line. And if you look at what's below us here, it's a cornucopia of litter, huge amount of plastic. And let's see what we can find. Lucian, try to identify for folks how this stuff comes about. And here's this bottle, so you look at this and say it's been in the environment for ages. Again, it's a Mount Franklin bottle. It probably isn't the other end of this, but there's a label that is printed here that is like a freshness date for when they sell them.
Oh, okay.
And that's July. So this hasn't been in the environment for even a year. It's lost its tamper seal, so that's in the bush somewhere. It's lost its label, so that's in the water somewhere. And it's just starting to fragment. It's full of
algae growing
mud
in it and everything.
and algae in it, because again, people think it's a bottle, it's plastic, it floats. PET's actually got a specific gravity that's much higher than water, so it sinks, and that's why it's full of this sort of stuff. I think the other thing that's interesting is there's quite a lot of glass and rubble as well as plastic. So
yeah, I've noticed he's glass behind you as well.
Yeah, so that's probably not litter. That's most likely that up in the park or somewhere in the local area, they've bought some clean fill from a construction and demolition recycler, and we're increasingly discovering lots of little residuals that are in that.
And here you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, no, oh sorry, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 straws in what's less than 2 meters. So check that out. That's the best example of single-use plastic in our environment.
So we've just noticed this little sapling that's, you know, trying to start its life on the edge of the tide line here, and it wasn't really obvious until Alicia pointed out that this plastic bag is rapidly killing this thing. And this is, you know, I'm going to find this hard to get off without killing the plant, because it is so tangled up.
Well, it's like you talk about wildlife, but no one really considers plants.
Exactly. Or the fact that this is a food source. So, you know, the chance that a bird's going to eat this isn't small.
Because it's so green, because it's covered in that algae.
You got it.
That's crazy.
And when I get this off, you know, the piece of biodiversity that is affected by it is actually less than the total amount of pollution tangled around it, really. I mean, I guess the first thing that we need to cover off with this is that there's a lot of outrage about litterers and tossers and people throwing all of this stuff out. And while it remains a problem and something government needs to focus on, it's also a fact of life that over half of this material that we find is, let's call it involuntary litter. You know, whether that's blowing out of garbage bins, being lost when the waste trucks come and pick it up, blown out of a landfill facility, etc, etc, etc. And that ties into understanding that, you know, you just can't rely on community education and fining for litter if you want to solve this problem. You have to address the point source. You know, you've got to look at what's common here. We see a lot of chip packets, lolly packets, just like we see a lot of beverage containers. There's a heck of a lot of polystyrene. And those products, you know, can only really be addressed through two types of regulatory action. A ban, like we're talking about with plastic bags, and you prompt a regulatory action around a ban if you can't fix the problem. So plastic bags is a classic example, because even if you were to try and put them through a recycling program, they're so lightweight that by shredding them you're just creating more and more plastic litter that's going to end up in the marine environment. Conversely, the even bigger sector of beverage containers, because it's a rigid plastic, you can use an incentive to encourage people to take back, and that'll achieve a very high level of effect. I guess that people wonder why we haven't had very much action. In the time that Boomerang Alliance has been around, which is in the order of 12 years, we've had 4 regulatory investigations on plastic bags, 3 regulatory investigations on container deposits, and 2 regulatory investigations on broad packaging impacts. None of which actually resulted in government forming a conclusion that there was a problem we needed to fix, or that a regulatory action would fix that problem. And the core problem of that is that we just continue to underestimate the nature of the problem. The last Commonwealth, what they call Decision Regulatory Impact Statement, actually concluded that the amount of litter and the amount of plastic entering the marine environment was not only not getting any worse, that in fact it was going down at a rate of 2 to 4% per annum. Now, if that conclusion's there, the only thing you can come up with is there's no need to act. So certainly one of the things we really need people to express their opinion on in the poll that we'll be doing with this blog and podcast is whether you agree with the government's conclusion that the amount of litter is going down, that the amount of litter will continue to go down without any form of government intervention, or is it just that this stuff's really difficult to count, so we're missing what's sunk to the bottom of the ocean, we're missing what's being ingested, we're missing what's fragmenting down to microscopic pieces. I think that's the problem, not this ridiculous notion that there's less of this crap in our parks, rivers and waterways.